My name is Gary Oppenheimer. I'm the founder and executive director of a nationwide hunger food waste nonprofit called ampleharvest.org. And yes, that's the real name of the organization. And I beat the often path by deciding that I could change the future of the health and effectively the wealth of the country by creating a nonprofit, creating a program that nobody had ever done before, solving a problem of hunger and food waste as an information thing rather than as a food thing. And I did it when nobody had ever done it before, so I had to forge my own trail and I had no idea what I was doing, but I managed to hit a moving target in the fog at night. I'm also almost 70 years old. I should be spending my time biking across America, and instead I'm spending my time talking to people across America and having a wonderful time doing it, meeting amazing people.
Welcome back to the Beat the Often Path podcast. I'm your host, Ross Palmer. On this show, we showcase unusual success stories, people who have lived their lives and careers outside the box, to remind us all that there's more to this life and that more possibilities are out there than the straight and narrow path we've been taught since school. Today, my guest is Gary Oppenheimer. Now, Gary is a man who walks the walk and talks the talk. Gary is the founder of ampleharvest.org, an organization that links the millions of amateur gardeners to local food pantries. Have you ever had a few too many tomatoes in your garden? Maybe just threw them away? Do you know someone with an extra basket of zucchini every fall? Well, ampleharvest.org makes it incredibly easy to make sure that your excess food doesn't go to waste. Food waste is one of the defining problems of our time, and Gary Oppenheimer has made it his life's work to solve this problem. His efforts have landed him on CNN, in the White House with 2 different sitting presidents, on TEDx multiple times, and more, and he was even featured in a shout-out from Michelle Obama herself. So I support everything about this man's journey. It's no secret. I'm pleased to introduce you to Gary Oppenheimer. Well, that's a great way to start. And I should let our listeners know that right before we started recording, you had told me the ultimate flex that I wasn't allowed to refer to your organization in the way that Michelle Obama had. Not many people can utter a sentence like that, period. I have never spoken with the former First Lady, but that just speaks to how far and wide your message has gotten.
Yeah, we were privileged to work with the Obama White House, and we're now working with the Biden White House on the ampleharvest.org. Michelle Obama, in the Obama years, ran a program called Let's Move, which encouraged people to both eat more healthy food and to exercise and move. And it was in natural alignment with what ampleharvest.org does of helping fresh food get to food pantries. And I was thrilled that she included ampleharvest.org in a talk she gave. And she also included an outtake in her book, American Grown. But in both cases, she used the term Ample Harvest. Our name is ampleharvest.org, but I did decide, out of respect and wisdom, to let her get away with it, but nobody else does.
But nobody else. Well, I hopefully won't make the same mistake. And I'll be a lot more approachable if I do. You won't have to get through staffers to reach me in case we make a blunder or a gaffe throughout this show. But again, it does speak to how amazing your idea is, and you have certainly received your fair share of accolades, TEDx twice, numerous different achievements throughout the years. You've been at this for quite some time, and people are taking notice. Can you perhaps just enlighten us on what the issue is that you've been trying to solve with your very engaging intro? I'm very curious how you stumbled upon this issue and your solution to it.
All right. Let me tell you what we are, and I'll tell you then. I'll go back to that intro that we talked about. But I hate waste. I grew up as a child being told, finish what's on your plate. Kids are starving in Europe. And so built into my DNA is you don't waste food, time, energy, money. You don't waste. Use what you have. And I became aware 13, 14 years ago of the immense amount of waste of food in this country. My own garden was vastly overproducing. And there came a point in which my wife said, you're not bringing any more of that stuff in the house. And so I didn't want it to go to waste. So I went out to find a place to which I could donate it. There was a battered women's shelter in my town. And I did take it there. And I learned a little bit about what they don't get typically, which is fresh food. I also was asked to take over a community garden at the time in my town. And the people there, this was in 2008 when I took over the garden, the people there were complaining to me that they hated the idea that food was being wasted in the garden towards the end of the season. People were bored, overwhelmed, going on vacation. And I just uttered, if we're going to have an ample harvest, by the way, I was the only time I said that word. If we're going to have an ample harvest, the least we can do is get to people who really need it. And that was the birth of a program that we built in that community garden to get food from the garden to local food pantries. Now, I didn't invent something new there. Many people, many programs across the country have been and are making sure that food in a community garden gets to local food programs. However, what I realized was that it wasn't me having the problem, and it wasn't my community garden having the problem. It was every gardener like me and every community in the country having the same problem. This wasn't my problem. This was a national problem, but it was also a national opportunity because that food I knew would be nourishing the people in my community. I had realized that we've all been told you're not allowed to donate the food. We've all heard the mantra of jars, cans, boxes, no fresh food at food drives.
Absolutely, yes.
So we've all, as gardeners, been told you can't do that. So either force on neighbors who don't really want it, take it to the office, or let it rot.
Yep.
Meanwhile, there are families in your neighborhood, families in community that really, really could use that food. What I had come to realize in March of 2009 was two things. A, this was a misinformation problem. You can't donate the food. It was also a missing information problem. I don't know where to donate it and when. I happened to have been connected to the battered women's shelter because I knew the woman who ran it. But when I went on Google and said, find me all the food pantries in my town, which is something I had done to try to do for the community garden, Google said the nearest one was 25 miles away, which I knew was wrong. This was an information problem. This was not a food problem. And technology is great at solving information problems. I had to take a step backwards from where we were. We think about food problems as being solved with more food. You have the food, you do something with it. But in this case, it wasn't a problem of a lack of food in America. We throw away 40% of our food and 50% of our produce. How can more food be the issue? The problem was we weren't using the food we actually already have. So I woke up one morning, I think it was March 9 of 2009, and I had an epiphany. And I sat down at my computer and I brought a PowerPoint. I like to think through there. And I mapped out what I thought would be a solution. Now, my background, just so you know, I was an early, back in the 70s, I was a computer programmer, what we then called mini computers, and the microcomputers and the personal computers. So I have a background in technology and in problem solving and coming up with new ways to connect things. For example, I invented the electronic newsletter. I did not invent spam. That was somebody else, but I did invent the electronic newsletter, and I think it was 86. And there've been other things. So I mapped out an idea, and I realized that the two problems to be solved were, A, I already said, we thought we couldn't donate the food. So the one thing is to tell people you can. And the second thing is how to find a food pantry. It required a search engine. So I mapped this whole thing out, and I said, this makes a lot of sense. I found two amazing volunteer programmers, one of whom herself was a food pantry client. I said, this is my vision. This is what we should be doing. And they helped build the AmpleHarvest.org website as it existed back then. And we launched it on May 18th. Of 2009. At that point, they were done. And this is now all on me, an aging geek with a good idea. There was no nonprofit. There was no organizational structure. There was no staff. But I was a guy on a mission. And the very, very first thing I did was I called up Catholic Charities. Now, I'm not Catholic, but I know that basically when the Pope says something, all the Catholics in the world hear it. I said, I've got a program, and I'd love for all the food pantries and all the Catholic churches to learn about this. I sent them information, and I think 4 days later, every diocese in the country had information. Pantries started signing up. The food pantry search engine started to get built and populated. I started speaking to the folks at Feeding America and different people. All in all, it grew and it grew and it grew, because I couldn't talk to gardeners until they had a place to which they could donate the food. 150 days later, which happened to be World Food Day, pure coincidence, the 1000th food pantry in America had signed up on ampleharvest.org. Meanwhile, I'm sorry?
Incredible. 150 days to 1,000?
Yeah, it spoke to both the need that was out there and the fact that this was an idea long overdue. Now,
Clearly.
admittedly, this is not rocket science. Anybody could have come up with the idea. And speaking to what your show is all about, maybe other people came up with the idea, but I acted on it. Having a good idea isn't enough if you just let it become dust off into the ethos and the universe. But if you do something with it, and I did, I had the energy, I had the time, I had the technology background, and I ran with it. I set up Google alerts, and I had Google telling me every day when reporters were talking about hunger and things. I was making emails and phone calls to reporters daily about, got this great thing, got a great story. I could press stuff together for them. And I started working with with gardeners across the country, and I had the wonderful opportunity, I should say gift, I think is the better word, that I was introduced to a wonderful, wonderful guy who's still a dear friend at the USDA named Bill Hoffman. Bill was the guy in charge of all the master gardeners in America. And he loved this idea. And I sent him a piece. He sent it out to all the master gardeners. It started to take off, not because I'm a celebrity, not because I'm a gazillionaire. It's because it was both a simple, easy to implement idea, and it empowered anybody anywhere in America to be the agent for change in their own community, reaching into their own backyard instead of their back pocket to help their neighbors in need. In 2009, by the way, we really weren't yet much talking about climate change. Now we are. But the waste of food is the number 3 contributor to climate change. So not only was this about reducing hunger and reducing malnutrition, but in the long run, it has an impact on reducing climate change in America. About 11 months after I founded it, April 2010, I incorporated as a 501c3 nonprofit with the legal name of ampleharvest.org, because it turns out the IRS doesn't like punctuation in the names. So while the IRS is ampleharvest.org, for everybody else is ampleharvest.org. But we incorporated as a nonprofit, and I was able to bring in people who started working with me to help. Also in April 2010, I was named CNN Hero.
I saw that.
And
congratulations.
Thank you. One of the interesting things that came out of it, and I read it on the air, was when they were running the CNN Hero videos during the week, somebody had emailed me. And I read this on the air when Ali Vachelis actually interviewed me. And he said that the year before he had heard about ampleharvest.org, he had thrown away 8 55-gallon drum of grapefruit from his property. He would have loved to have donated, but he didn't know that he could or to where. I also then wrote to the White House. And I said, I got this great program. Michelle Obama's doing this wonderful work. I'd love to work with her. And somebody at the White House said, yeah, go away. I mean, not that way, but they said, she's busy. She can't help you. But through the USDA and Bill Hoffman, ampleharvest.org ended up on the USDA website, the homepage, actually. And then it ended up on the White House website. So by the way, you can, if you want, go to ampleharvest.org/White House, you'll actually see Michelle Obama speaking, the piece of a book, and I think the picture of that homepage. The program continued to grow. I should say, by the way, Google came on board early I think within 8 weeks of ampleharvest.org's launch. I got a $10,000 month-over-month grant from Google for advertising, which has since quadrupled to $40,000 a month ongoing. So Google is a huge hero in this country for reducing hunger, malnutrition, and the waste of food, because we get to use that platform to tell people, gardeners, for example, about what we're doing. Over time, I was able to raise some money, get some staff in. More and more people took interest. There were more write-ups, more shows, more articles. I was named Huffington Post Game Changer 2011. I think Yahoo named me the greatest person of the day, which really annoyed my wife because she thinks my head's already big enough. I was nominated for the World Food Prize. All these wonderful accolades. Thank you. But the real heroes are the gardeners. And I make the argument that when you see an orchestra playing, you see the person in the tuxedo, they're waving the stick, but it's the musicians actually making the music. Everybody applauds the conductor, but it's really the musicians who earn it. I'm the face. I get the accolades, but it should really be the 62 million people in this country who garden in their backyard or in a community garden or in a flower pot. They're the real heroes. So the program has continued to grow. Today, today we are in 4,200 communities in all 50 states, working with 8,000 and growing food pantries. We are right now working on building a special adaptation to make it a really great fit for Indian country, for Native American reservations across the country, because there are some adaptations we need to make ample harvest work in that environment. I should say, when the pandemic started, we got a gentleman named Mike Sutter reached out to us. He's the CEO of Bonnie Plants. And if you're not familiar with Bonnie Plants, this is their stuff. They're the largest provider of seedlings in America. So when you go to a garden center or your supermarket and you want to buy a tomato plant, a pepper plant, it's probably Bonnie Plants. And they said, okay, we love what you're doing. We want to work with you. We want to help. And they made a really, really generous contribution to Ample Harvest. They got involved all the way. And that is a major thing that moved AmpleHarvest.org forward. And much more recently, a brand new partnership with the Home Depot. And within a few weeks, every Home Depot store, all 2,000 nationwide, are going to be having point of sale information in the garden centers about donating garden produce. The basic premise of the whole thing is built on a theory of change that I have, which is that to solve a problem, you find people who really care about it, in this case, the gardeners. You give them information, you give them technology to solve it and get out of their way. So we have no logistics. We never touch the food. I'm making sure that you know that you can donate the food. I'm presenting you to a place to where you can donate the food. And by the way, the pantry is telling you the ideal day and time to donate. Why? Because if they're distributing food on, say, Sunday afternoons, and you show up with your lettuce on Monday, that's either going to be in a refrigerator, which is costly, or just going to wilt. But if they said, we're distributing food on Sunday afternoon, we'd like you to come Sunday morning. Now you know when to harvest. You come in with that fresh food, you put it on the table. Hours later, it's gone home to a hungry family, and they're eating food fresher than you and I can buy in a supermarket. And for the rest of the gardener's gardening life, they will be donating, when they have a surplus, to that food pantry. So we have no logistics. We're actually a team of only 5 staff.
Wow.
Orchestrating this large-scale change, because, again, the problem wasn't the food. It was missing information and misinformation.
I love that.
AmpleHarvest.org.
It's a brilliant concept. You mentioned, so 40% of all food, 50% of produce gets thrown away. Do you think part of that has to do with this country's strange relationship to what is called food safety? I just saw a video of a grocery store where the power went out for, let's say, 1 hour. And there was a video of just tons and tons and tons of food, perfectly good food, if we're being honest, that had to be thrown out. All of it, because they lost refrigeration for a single hour. Do you think that we're too strict in this country about the kind of food that we can accept and where we can accept it? Or do you think that those laws are justified?
Let me start by saying I am not a lawyer, and I'm not going to give any legal opinion.
Sure.
But there is a gentleman named Tristan Stewart, who's sort of the global expert on the waste of food. He's a dear friend. He's from the UK. He's on our board of advisors. And he has properly advocated that we are all equipped with the brilliant, amazing technology to detect food that you shouldn't be eating. And it's your nose. If it doesn't smell good, if it doesn't look good, maybe if it doesn't taste good, don't eat it. Now, I don't know what food they were throwing away. If the ice cream was melting or the dairy was going bad, sure. Frankly, if it was a long shelf life, things like carrots and onions, potatoes, leave them alone. But the bigger, I wouldn't be looking at businesses that are responding to something like that, and for their own safety and maybe their customer safety, disposing of food. The major loss of food in this country happens because of people like you and me and everybody else. The problem is that we go to a restaurant and the portion size is too big, or at home, We have too much. We buy too much. I have a friend who is frightened of me because she will buy a sandwich and only eat half. And she knows that I'll be glaring at her for the rest of the day if she doesn't finish the other half, or at least take it home or whatever. We all waste food. Businesses certainly do. Farms have food loss stores. I mean, there's food loss all the way, but I think the easiest place to look at food loss and the easiest place to fix the waste of food is with us. So let me take you to another program that ampleharvest.org has that speaks to that very issue. And it's built on one idea. 70% of America's food pantries are in a house of worship. They're in a church or a synagogue or a mosque. And 2016, we're having our weekly staff meeting, and my mind started to wander. And that's not a good sign when you're running a meeting and your own mind wanders, but that's what happened. And I said to my staff, 70% of food pantries are in house of worship. We had informal partnerships with the faith community across the board. I mean, I started outreach with the Catholic Charities, but we've worked with all faiths. But I said, we're missing an opportunity and we should take advantage of it. Look at our theory of change. Find people who care about something, give them information, give them a tool, and get out of their way. I said, what if we went to faith leaders across the country, pastors, rabbis, imams, priests, and gave them basic information about food waste, the USDA stuff, refed, all the basic stuff. And then what if we gave them a sermon written in their own faith tradition, and then gave them 9 calls to action that they could talk about with their congregation?
Wow.
What if instead of a priest or an imam talking about feeding the hungry, feeding the poor, as part of that discussion, they could talk about what their own scriptures, their own traditions, their own values say about not wasting food. The discussion of the waste of food actually occurs in all faiths, but it's overlooked, which, by the way, is the third piece of the information issue. In that case, it's misinformation. I'll give you an example. Look in the Old Testament, book of Exodus, Hebrews are leaving Egypt, and Moses says, we need manna to feed the people. And God says, I'm going to give you manna, but don't take more than one day's portion, because if you do, it'll rot. That's a food waste discussion in black and white, but you almost never hear anybody talking about it that way. So what we did is we wrote a faithy sounding but faithless sermon about the waste of food. Then we gave it to a partner program at the time called Green Faith, and they translated it into Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, Unitarian. The same sermon with a different spin for each of the religions. We created 9 calls to action. Of course, the first one is gardeners donating food. But it was also portion sizes on your plate. It was learning about date labeling. It was learning about not shopping without a list, the things that you and I and everybody else can do. And we even did a game show for the religious school, and we put it up. And today it's called faithfightsfoodwaste.org, where anybody can go, whether you are a faith leader or a person of faith. 88 million people a week in America go to a house of worship voluntarily to listen to their faith leader talk about something they both agree in, whatever that faith tradition is. These 88 million people are not listening to wonks like me or the other food waste people, because they just want to pay the bills, keep the kids out of trouble, and not get COVID. But they are going to the house of worship. So it's a great way to not only get the message to the 40%, 50% of the people in the pews who are gardeners, but for us to go right back to the pastor and to say, is there a food pantry in your house of worship? Have them sign up. The same theory of change, except, and it elevated ampleharvest.org's mission. It actually provided a benefit for all of the people in the food waste space also. And it was, again, built around the same idea. So this was a natural evolution. And I want to be clear again, we're not a faith-based organization. We don't advocate faith. We don't push any faith. This is, if you are connected with a faith community, this is a connection for you. And the program that we're now working on for Indian country to help tribal communities across the country benefit from ampleharvest.org is built on the ampleharvest.org model and just adapted to special circumstances there.
Absolutely brilliant. I'm blown away. That's such a clever solution to distributing. I mean, you've had a number of clever solutions. That's something that's quite striking about your progress. You've reached out to the right people at the right time. That's very fascinating how you chose to disseminate your idea throughout the world, and you used a combination of data and intelligence to do that, it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, there are wonderful people all across America. And by the way, our focus is the 50 states. So yeah, Faith Fights Food Waste can be used globally, but Ample Harvest.org's Gardener thing is only in 50 states. There are lots of wonderful people and programs doing great work, and they're all across the country in many, many, many communities. But most of the country doesn't see them. So I do tell people, and it's not frequently asked questions, if you already are working with Plant Row or America's Grow or some other food recovery or rescue groups, keep doing it. We don't want to interfere with that. We want to be in the places where nobody else is. It's sort of like when you want to buy a book. You should go to the bookstore in your town to buy the book. But if you don't have a bookstore, then you go to Amazon.
Yep.
You're working locally. So we blanket the country. The model of Ample Harvest.org is that because I don't need boots on the, I want to reframe that. I don't need to put boots on the ground because the boots are already there. The gardener is already in the community. The food pantries are in the community. I have to simply get them connected with each other. So we can scale into any community real time. And so the number of communities we're in continues to grow. The number of food pantries in our network continues to grow. And the number of gardeners who are learning about their opportunity to donate continues to grow. And by the way, and this is a terrible thing to say during a pandemic, but AmpleHarvest.org is viral. And the reason is that once I tell Ross that he can donate food from his garden to a food pantry down the street, you've heard of AmpleHarvest.org, you learned about it. You no longer need us, by the way, because your misinformation and missing information problem has been solved for the rest of your life. But now your neighbor over the picket fence is talking about too many zucchini in their garden, and you're in the position to say, St. Mary's Food Pantry takes the food Wednesday afternoons. They've never heard of AmpleHarvest.org. They never need to because you've become the vector for the information. So the result is by you learning about AmpleHarvest.org through whatever way, it spreads through you. Ultimately, every gardener in America will know that they can donate food, just like everybody in America knows that you don't throw away the old winter coat, you give it to a thrift shop.
I wanted to ask about the personal ramifications. So you've made this decision. You've gone the nonprofit route. You have a tech background. You know your way around computers, and you know how to get in touch with important people about ideas. How do you feel about having built your life around this mission versus, say, another mission of, namely, how can I make the most money I possibly can? Who cares how it's done?
I had a good career. For years, I was a self-employed computer programmer, and I didn't mention this earlier, but for much of my adult life, I lived on a boat on the Hudson River in Manhattan.
Wow.
And so I did my programming work on that boat at 40 years at the 79th Street Boat Basin. I then was brought in by a company called MCI Mail in 1986. MCI Mail was, along with EasyLink and AT&T, one of the earlier email systems before you had the freely available internet, and they made a good living there. So I made a comfortable living. I made my savings, and having the advantage of my DNA not letting me waste, I nurtured the money. I saved it. I didn't waste things, and so my wife and I were comfortable, not rich, but we were comfortable, and I was planning when all that stuff was over to go biking across America. I didn't have grand plans for stuff, but I also, again, my DNA about waste. I'm sorry. And I guess in some ways it is summed up by what a former board member said about me. She said I was the perfect nexus of geek and social responsibility. I didn't want to see things that could be fixed go unfixed. And this was something that I could fix. I don't have any regrets about it. It's been an amazing experience. I have met the most amazing people from two presidents, President Clinton and President Obama, Michelle Obama. But I've also sat at a table. I've stood in the shadows of amazing people. I mean, I sat at a table with a gentleman from India who managed to keep 1 billion people from starving to death by how he bred, I think it was some crop to grow only a foot tall so it wouldn't be wiped out by monsoons. I mean, there have been people one woman who I met at a White House conference is an amazing woman who was raising 2 kids inner city in Philly and struggling about the food and talking about it. And she was just been named a global citizen. I get to be with these people. Whom else would I say? And it's not that this is not a name dropping thing. I get to be in the presence of really amazing people. I also really, really enjoy talking, which you probably figured that out. But
That's
I enjoy
important in your line of work, yeah.
I enjoy giving talks and speeches, and even when I've traveled around the country to give keynote speeches and panel talks, I donated a colloquium to a local college or university. So I'll give you an example. I went years ago to give a public talk in Salt Lake City. And I then gave a talk, I think it was at the Salt Lake City Community College. And I said, bring me a bunch of students. And I polled them. I said, what do you want to do to make the world better? Save the whales, climate change, gender equality. I just wanted to know what they were all thinking. And then I took them on my journey through ampleharvest.org, not to try to convince them about donating garden produce. This is what I learned along the way. These were the successes. These were the mistakes. And trying to tailor it to each of them in terms of what they want to do, to give them a bit of my experience and expertise to help move them along on the path that they want to do. I love that. Plus, I like going to schools where I don't have homework due. And so these types of talking with people, I talk to students regularly who are doing assignments on food waste or stuff like that. It has been an amazing experience, and it continues to be so. This project we're starting with Native American communities across the country. I just came away last week from the Native American Nutrition Conference outside of Minneapolis, where I was in a room with 500 people of all nations from Native Americans to learn about their values, their traditions, the important things that of the subtleties in language and things like that to better build ample harvest in Indian country to meet the needs of this community. But I get to see how they've lived and what's important to them, what their elders spoke about, what the values are, things I would otherwise have never had a chance to experience otherwise. We'll give you one other example. When I was when I was in high school, I was fascinated by, oh my God, my name just blanked. It's terrible. The gentleman who came up with all the ways to use peanuts.
Oh, George Washington Carver?
I'll start that over again. Thank you. That's the part you want to cut.
Sure.
When in high school, I loved George Washington Carver. He was a guy who came up with hundreds of ways to use peanuts. And he was a brilliant, brilliant man, came out of the horrific experience of the slavery world and had this brilliant mind. And then I got invited to give the keynote at the George Washington Carver Centennial in New Orleans. Wow.
Well, that's an honor and a half.
Yeah, and it was random. It wasn't like I said, hey, I love this man. Can you bring me in? They called me up and they said, we'd like you to come and talk. And I said, yes. The pandemic has made it difficult to get out and do talks with people because for obvious reasons. I did Zoom things. That's not as engaging. Last September, I did my first in-person talk in Virginia since the pandemic started. And before I started the talk, I simply walked the length of the room and back. I just wanted to see people in 3D.
Right, just see the back of a head for once.
And it was really nice to not have a mute button in front of somebody, not to see a camera turned off, and to be able to read people's faces and answer their questions in real time and stay after and answer questions. This is something that I really like doing. There are other people in the food waste space who are like that, where that's that give and take. And the point of it is it's not so much me telling them what they can be doing, but I know I'm very offering telling them that, hey, if an aging geek like me, who wasn't really good in school, not a millionaire, not a rock star, can do this, why can't you? What is it that you want to do that you thought, oh, I can't do it because I'm only me? And I really think the whole world is full of people who are only me's. None of us are born Einsteins, well, except for Einstein. The rest of us just have to have you don't even need a plan. You need a passion. Act on it. And I've said this when I've spoken to students. Even if you fail half the time, you've still moved the needle forward. And that's a really, really important thing, that you don't have to be completely successful to still be a success. And too many people keep on thinking that if I'm not perfect, if I don't succeed, move the needle forward. And that's really so when you're donating garden produce, you don't need a truckload of food. If you've got a handful of tomatoes, it'll be commingled with the other hundreds of handfuls of tomatoes, and the needle gets moved forward. Your contribution isn't small enough to be worthless, and nor are you. I think there's a really valuable lessons in life.
I agree.
I think also, and I should point this out, that I'm a long distance biker, and the bike club I belong to in New Jersey, they have a wonderful saying that only half the hills are up. And I think when you look at a problem and you're looking at a solution, yeah, there are going to be all sorts of obstacles and challenges and difficulties and stuff, but there's an awful lot of successes that come out of it too. And so just go into it. Don't look at the top of the hill. Just keep on climbing every 10 feet. That's how you get to the top of the hill. I think anybody can take on any problem that they want in whatever space it is. And the only thing you can't do is not do anything. Then nothing gets better.
So I appreciate what you're doing. I hope I can be a small part of spreading the message, and that more people get the idea of, hey, I can garden, hey, I can donate. And like you said, nobody and no gift is too small to be worthless. What a beautiful phrase that is.
I appreciate that. By the way, in terms of crazy places to go, a pop-up just came on my screen. When you and I are done, I'm on a White House conference call on hunger and nutrition as part of the bi-weekly series the White House is running, leading up to a hunger conference that will be taking place there in September. So I'm back to you. You're back to back between you and the White House.
Well, I shan't keep them waiting. I'll just express my gratitude once more, and I will say thank you so much. Enjoy your next meeting. We'll be in touch, and I appreciate you, and I really appreciate you taking the time. And I'll reach out shortly.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. And again, everybody, if you're a gardener, donate. If you want to help ampleharvest.org, we also would appreciate your support. Thank you. This was a great talk, and looking forward to chatting with you down the road.
Me too. Enjoy your meeting. Thank you once more, and I'll be talking to you soon. And with that, the podcast is over.